Hey, mamas out there, it's Jennifer Ford Berry back again with another episode of the 29-Minute Mom. And today is an episode that is going to truly, truly inspire you. If you are out there struggling with your faith today, if you've ever experienced a crisis of belief, this is the show for you. Please welcome my guest, Jeremy Downs. He is the author of the book Stumbling Toward the Sacred. So welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, I cannot wait to hear this entire story. I've only heard bits and pieces, but I want you to just kind of go ahead and jump in. Tell us what led you to write this book and where were you in your life when you first experienced your own crisis of belief?
Good question. Interestingly, this all occurred about 8 years ago. And I guess it would be a coinciding of two events. I call them freight trains that kind of crashed at the same time and worked out in my favor and the aftermath. So as far as crisis of belief, I pretty much grew up in the church. My parents were in and out of the church, multiple churches when I was young. And a lot of times I was kicking and screaming, but I had to go every Sunday. And so I think a lot of people have that experience. And so over the years, I was aware of the message. I did have a belief in God, but it just wasn't real to me. Everything was going well in my life. Of course, this was 8 years ago, pre-pandemic. Everything was going well. Everything was great with my family and my job, and stable and successful. I didn't have any complaints or issues externally, but I think we all know, and we're finding out most recently, there can be an underlying significant spiritual struggle that may make no sense at all. So for me, specifically, I just wanted more. So, I would go to church and try to get involved and do, quote unquote, the right things you're supposed to do. But at the end of the day, I just didn't have a real, I would call it spiritual, but of course, biblical relationship with God. And so that's what I was yearning for quite some time. And for several years, I felt that way. I prayed, tried to be prayerful, tried to read anything I could do, but I just felt like I couldn't get there. So that was my situation that I was experiencing. And then one day, I can get into the phase two, the happenstance that happened. I don't know if you're aware of Amanita muscaria mushrooms, but they have absolutely nothing to do with what you're reading about in the news, the psilocybin, hippie trippy stuff. They're completely legal. People don't use them and don't know much about them. And I thought I did my research, but I come to find out there's some serious substances. And I thought it was more of a nootropic that you would take. And so and of course I do everything. When I do it right. So I bought a couple large bags. I thought, hey, I'll just have a few of these every day. I'm thinking like go with my coffee, maybe be creative that day, whatever. So,
Yeah.
and I read that it's completely safe. Found out later in large quantities you could die if you take too much. And it really doesn't happen often, but it's possible. So one day I got out a health shake in a blender, tried some out. Nothing happened at all. Had some more, had another big dose. Nothing happened at all. And then I felt terrible, like I was sick. Went to bed and almost like blacked out. I just felt completely horrible. Went upstairs, went to bed. Now, come to find out, I did not know this at the time, but my wife told me afterward that I fired the blender up at least one other time, had no recollection, ate all of the mushrooms, and went to bed. So, I mean, we're talking, two piles, which no one would ever do except me. And so while I'm having this crisis, this, I guess, spiritual yearning, and this is why I call it stumbling toward the sacred. I had this occur. So it's
Getting that now.
yeah, and I always think I, educate myself and make good decisions, but not in this instance. Maybe it was ironically the best I made. But so, long story short, wasn't doing well, having trouble breathing. My wife called 911. Police came, and I hadn't done anything illegal, but I had to go to the I had to go in and get tested at the hospital, spend the night in jail to make sure I was sobered up. But during this experience, what happened to me was I essentially, when I first took them, I felt like I was sleeping, because I basically passed out. I had this kind of psychedelic type experience where I was walking down a hallway, and I saw different rooms and places and windows, and I would peer through and see events that occurred to me when I was 10 years old. I looked at
Wow.
them, and I saw places that I'd wanted to go to when I was 10 years old. I wasn't allowed to visit. And then I had this feeling, oh, you can open that and jump in and go to those places you weren't able to visit when you were a child. Some of the weird, stuff you hear when you hear about these substances. This one's a little unique, and then what happened, I started having severe chest pain. Really severe chest pain. I talk about it in the book. And at that time, I left Earth. I went up to this, literally like went up to the sky, saw my house below, saw the planet, went to another place, basically traveled like through dimensions. It's hard to explain. I talked about it in the book, but I saw different places, went different like areas. I can understand when people talk about heaven and hell and dimensions. I understand it well now after this experience, in a way I never did. At the end, I was literally in a huge, vast black space in outer space, and I could see like all like cosmos in the distance, and I was with God, and I was dying. So I had this near death experience. The takeaway from that was, and I detail it further in the book, but I had an appreciation for creation. I think when people read in the Bible about fearing God, it isn't fear that you run away from. This is really the thing that I learned from this experience. It isn't something you run away from. It just is a realization of reality, a realization of God and your place in the universe. We're basically a speck of lint on a shirt that no one notices other than God. And
You said it's a realization, which is interesting to me because it's almost like this is already there the way it was, but your perspective changed.
Exactly. And I don't think people have that perspective, but biblically, when you read the Bible, it portrays that perspective. It just doesn't convey effectively, unless, we have the right heart and the right mind, which I don't think I did. Or you're very stubborn like me and had to do something crazy like this to wake up. God kind of knocks you in the head and says, hey, this is what you should be understanding. So the book, it is not a message of take drugs and that'll enable you to have a better relationship. It's a message of happenstance. And the significance of that experience was that when it was over, I understood, I think, what I regard, and I think this is very biblical. Step one, when in your relationship with God, understand creation in context, appreciate what exists, appreciate God, and don't take those things for granted, and treat them with awe and respect, and know your place in the universe, and realize we're lucky to even exist, and we're lucky God even lets us live. So
Yeah.
So I came when this happened.
To me, Jeremy, it sounds like though that he met you where you were. He knows how he can get into a crack into our life if we're struggling, and it looks different for everybody. So this particular circumstance worked for you. It might not work for somebody else, but he has a personal, intimate relationship with each of us. So he knows your mind, how he can maybe get his point across. And in this situation, it worked perfectly.
Definitely hard, and I'm hard-headed. That's how I just explained it, even though I was trying. So, so what? A couple of fascinating things happened also. So that was really the whole experience, the mushroom experience and all that. Um, that was really just the beginning. So when I came back, I got out of jail, saw my wife, and she took this very well. By the way, I have just the best wife universe, because I think most people, man or woman, would be very upset. And she said, look, I get it, I know you didn't mean to do this, I'm glad you're here. That's what
Yeah. Yeah. So how long were you fighting for your life?
That's a good question. I mean, from start to finish, I don't know if it was a couple hours or so. But that, of course, I didn't have a context for time, because that would be about when I went to bed to about when, I was back. And a couple fascinating things happened also while this was happening. I was in this dark place. There was this white marble table with an inscription on it. God was just basically telling me, hey, this is your place. Like, what are you thinking? And that is basically what I created. And I was terrified, started yelling, please save me, Jesus. I was yelling, I love you, Jesus. And it's interesting too, because you're in church your whole life, but when this actually happens, I guess it's kind of like going to the Super Bowl. You say, do I really have what it takes to succeed in this situation? So you know what you said, what you believed, but
Yeah.
the real test. So while that was happening, I was here, and my wife told me afterward, I walked down the steps. I had a completely different posture, different gait, different, carried myself completely differently, completely coordinated movements. I walked through the house and started speaking fluently in French.
Wow.
I was horrible in French class in like junior high. I couldn't, I could maybe order some food, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Fluently in French. And then I switched and started speaking fluently in an African dialect. And my wife was like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. Afterward, it's hard to explain something like that. But in my opinion, I think spiritually, or my spirit was somewhere else. Maybe something inhabited me, feel like possessed or whatever. I don't think we understand all these things. So I think something was just there until I came back. And then I switched back to myself again. I was also, when I was having that experience, I was on these mushrooms, and it was almost like a stupor I was in. When I was having this experience, though, I was 100% sober, like more sober than I think I've been my entire life. And I was, there, aware, knew who I was, knew where I was. When I came back, as soon as I returned, I was, totally in the stupor again when I came back to planet Earth. So
You had clarity. You had clarity when you were in that state.
I did, and I would describe for people what happens is, it's interesting, and I tried to explain this well when I wrote about it, but your everything just goes away. And you're in a place where you may not even know your name, but 100% who you are. And it's just your core, who you are in God. And that's what's evaluated at the end of the day. And something hard to describe, but it made sense. And it was a pure experience, where it is truly you and God. It doesn't matter where you're from, who you were married to, anything else, your past, what you did. And that was what I experienced. And then I came back and was, out of it again as soon as I came back.
So how long did it take for this to all sink in and to make a difference in your life?
So, well, the interesting thing, so when I wrote the book, I mean, it starts off with this component, creation, and understanding what is and what we should be aware of and mindful of with regard to us and God in that relationship. But the significance of the story and what I have in the book, other than talking about the beginning, all occurred the week after the experience happened to me. So after that, for the next week, I heard a voice talking to me, telling me, it was almost like a personal coach. I mean, but I was just getting battered. I mean, it was telling me what I do wrong. It was the strangest thing ever.
A negative coach.
It was like negative motivation. It was like, when you speak, you need to approach it this way. When you try to convey information, you need to start from start to finish sequentially, and describe things in an accurate way that people can follow. And so I was hearing all these weird, just issues that I think I've had my whole life. And then what was the most significant and remarkable was I had an understanding of basically everything I've heard my whole life. Biblical text, Sunday school, honor your mother and father, love your neighbor, all these basic things, right?
Yeah.
For the first time in my life, I started hearing and understanding what all of those lessons meant that I just didn't really get my whole life. So I had a week of this input from, I guess, the best spiritual or best coach that exists. And I just
The
heard,
Holy Spirit.
yes, yeah, and that's exactly what it was. So I heard those things, and then that really was the basis for the book. So the purpose of the book and the theme is, shake you up, okay, see what's significant, which is having a relationship with God. And then going through the steps, how do we do that? Well, you start by understanding reality. Then you start looking at all of these biblical concepts that have been misused and misunderstood, like what is sin, what is temptation, what are idols, everything. Sin is our degree of separation from God. It isn't a list of a naughty list that like Santa Claus looks at, or a good or bad list. So just capturing all of that information, those concepts, understanding what they really mean. And there's a lot in there about the Holy Spirit, because that's in the Bible, emphatically, but we seem to neglect that. And I've seen a few, like Francis Chan had a book, relating to the lost God. I think he called it something like that. Sorry if I said his title wrong, but these great Christian authors have talked about that, lost God that we don't appreciate. I experienced it and wrote about it. And so the purpose of the book is to develop a personal relationship with God. And I think that we miss that a lot. And I think that also the church misses that frequently. And I think, a lot of times we go to church, and this is what happened to me, in all different scenarios. And it's a Rotary Club, or you go to get something out of it for yourself. Or, maybe you're at home alone. You don't have a support, the support or organization. You don't have people around you that are helping you and lifting you up, coaching you or supporting you. And so people go to church for some of those things, which is good. But the purpose of the church is to show you the way to personally knowing God. That's the purpose of the church. And I think that's lost. And I think that was one of the issues, I experienced, because that was the longing I had. And I think all of us have that longing. And so through this experience, is somewhat looking back, hindsight's 2020. I thought I was Christian, and I know I was pursuing God, but it's almost like a testimony that anyone could apply to their own lives to try to find God, and and it was interesting because it happened sequentially to me. So I tried to map it out that way. And, it was written for people who are, people who are suicidal, people who are lonely, people who gave up on church. I know a lot of those people and my family and friends, and to say, look, your basis of understanding, your stereotype of religion, that's here, but God is in another place, and the Bible clearly explains it. So let's just get rid of those stereotypes, break through, and look at what it's really supposed to look like if you really want to know God personally.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. And my question is, how did you take all this information, this insight, this awakening, and apply it to your everyday life? Like, what did that look like after? How did you change?
So, and that's a great question. One thing I learned was, and it's pretty amazing, it's biblical, but it's another thing we don't think about. I think the closer the so the I think it's hard for us to understand spiritual change, I mean, we have three components where I say, and I've heard people coin this and pastors talk about physical, psychological, and spiritual. So I think the spiritual, quote unquote, is harder to understand and it's often neglected. But I think the closer you are to God, and a lot of it has to do with motivation, are you 100% shedding everything else to follow God? I think the closer you get to God, you just change. So and I think and that is, like you said, the Holy Spirit, shared with God, shared with Jesus Christ, shared with us if we're really Christian. And so the different perspective is caused by a spiritual change that occurs. And if you talk about this with someone who's secular, who isn't Christian, I mean, basically make fun of you because it sounds ridiculous. But when you experience it, you understand it. And so, you sincerely start, you care about people more, you see things differently. And it's a spiritual change. It isn't, I'll look at the rule in the Bible, it says to love my neighbor, so I'm going to make him a cake and go next door and give it to him. That's like physical,
Yeah.
There's a spiritual change that happens where you actually want to do that. And
yes.
and
I mean,
honestly,
that's powerful.
what's that?
That's powerful, because what I'm hearing, this is why I love your story, Jeremy, is because a lot of times everybody wants to put Christianity in this box, and there's this list at how it's supposed to look and feel. And that's not what it is. It's a personal, intimate relationship with God. And all of our relationships, just like we have with our marriages, all our relationships with God can look completely different from each other. We don't have to keep trying to make, other people have a relationship that looks like ours. And we can't judge other people's relationship with God. It's always individual. And so how he reached you in this situation might not work for somebody else. But the point is that he reached you because he loves you that much, that he wanted to prove to you that he is real, and he wanted to come to you as he is. But I think the cool part is that he was already there. You just didn't see him and feel him, and now you do. And that is because you got so close, your spirit was changed. And I think that's so powerful. And just like you mentioned, when our spirit is changed and when we're living aligned in that spirit, then we want to do all the things that are listed in the Bible as what we're supposed to do, right? But sometimes we can't even explain why all of a sudden we feel more love for our neighbor. It's because he's working in us. It's not because of what we're doing.
Exactly. And that's a great point. I describe it as you have all these quote unquote rules. People think of the Bible as, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't have fun. When in actuality, it's this freeing experience where you don't really care about anything. You just care about that relationship with God. And once you get there, and the stronger you are, with your relationship with God, and the closer you get to God, the more you don't care about the rules. You'll just do them because it's not even significant. You want to do them. Mm-hmm. and you don't look at the list of rules. You're going to innately follow, a healthy, more fulfilling thought process, and just how you manage yourself, how you conduct your life, and what decisions you make, because you're close to God, so you can't lose, and you're not right. Going to get sidetracked. And there's a lot in the book about that, temptations, and just basically sometimes they're just stupid things that consume our time that should not, when we should really more effectively be focused on our spiritual health and where we should be with God, and so all the other things just, they fall into place, and that's not the focus. It's just happenstance and circumstantial, and it all works out, and it's biblical if you're motivated correctly.
It sounds like we should stop overthinking so much and just have the relationship, right? And stop thinking about what it's supposed to look like or feel like, and actually quit wasting energy on that and experience it instead. So wrapping this up, what is the one thing, if there's somebody listening today and they were, flipping through the podcasts and they hear this episode and they were like, man, I can totally connect with this guy. Like, this is how I used to feel, or this is how I am feeling. And I want to have a deeper, more intimate relationship. I want to actually feel the presence of God in my life, something that can stir, me up and light me on fire. What would be the summary of what God has done for you and what you believe he can do for that person listening?
Well, I think it starts with, we're talking about something spiritual, and one of the most significant aspect of your life. So I think it really starts with your motivation. Check your heart. Look, when you wake up in the morning, what do you focus on? Do you think about distractions, your kids, what you have to do that day? Is the whole world on your shoulders and you feel like you need to be the one who achieves and is a success and gets things done? Or do you wake up and you're 100% wholly motivated by pursuing God and having that relationship as your basis? And if you can really be that succinctly and emphatically motivated, then that's how you go in another direction. And that relationship between you and God, it's a personal relationship. It's a one-on-one relationship. And when you start with that, and that's truly your number one priority, that's how you that's how you go to different places, and that's how you get to where you want to be.
So good, Jeremy. So good. So the name of the book, once again, is Stumbling Toward the Sacred. You can get it where? Tell us where we can get it.
So I have a website, stumblingtowardthesacred.com. That's sort of my landing page. And then you can go on to amazon.com, of course, and type in Stumbling Toward the Sacred. It'll pop up there. I also started doing Instagram. I try to put some useful segments in there, and I have a couple poems or whatever kind of hits me. I don't know if I'm quick enough and put enough info in there, but when I have time. So if you're interested in that, it's stumbling_toward_the_sacred on Instagram.com.
So I bet you didn't see this coming in your future, right?
Not at all. But
writing a book and being a published author.
Not at all. It chose me. I did not choose this, and and I don't think I'll financially make any rewards or benefits from this, but this is wholly, entirely what I want to do. So
yeah. Well, the purpose of writing any book is not financial gain. It's always to get your message out in the world to help and serve others. So I just pray that, blessing and favor is on this book. And I think it will help so many people. And I just thank you so much for being part of the 29-Minute Mom and sharing your story with all of our audience. So best of luck to you, Jeremy.
Thank you. I hope it's beneficial for your viewers.
It will be for sure. Until next time, ladies, we will wish you a very productive and blessed week from my heart to yours. And we'll see you again next week.